There were soldiers laying on the incline with their feet blown off. They were all in a minefield. And the tape, we used to call tracing tape, all around them to protect anyone else from going into that minefield. And those were the bravest soldiers because they kept directing us away from the minefield. The bravest soldiers that I can imagine I've ever seen in my life. There with their feet blown off, telling us not to come into the minefield.
America's entry into the war against Nazi Germany began with Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa, on November 8, 1942. Inexperienced and untested American soldiers were introduced for the first time to combat during the course of the North African campaign against a skilled German-Italian war machine. However, 6 months later, after bitter, hard fighting in the rugged mountainous regions of Algeria and Tunisia, it was the American soldier in concert with his British and French comrades who stood victorious. One veteran who fought in North Africa is former U.S. Army Technical Sergeant Samuel A. Bakal, who served with the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion as a demolition specialist. He then went on to participate in the Sicilian, Normandy, Northern France, Ardennes, Rhineland, and the Central European campaigns. He was awarded the Silver Star, the nation's 3rd highest decoration for valor in combat, and also a Bronze Star. Sam also received a Purple Heart for wounds suffered in battle.
I think in those days it was a 13-week basic training course, but I already was told that I was going to be in the 1st Division because the cadre from the 1st Division, they already had left for, 1st Division left for Scotland. And the cadre remained here in Fort Meade, Maryland. And I was sent to Fort Meade and spent 11 to 13 weeks in basic training, and then went immediately to Africa from there. I did spend no other time in service here. I was joined the outfit right there, which was coming right into the Kasserine Pass. They already had made the invasion, the 1st Division, in Oran. And I hooked up with the outfit right at the end of the Kasserine Pass. They were coming out of it, and I was joining them as we were retreating. And we all got together in this desert oasis called El Ghita in North Africa. Of course, I was in the Corps of Engineers, which is the 1st Engineer Combat Battalion attached to the 1st Division. And we did some more maneuvering, and that's when I got into the, you know, my enterprise was just mines. And that's when I ran into the first German mines, which were the S mines and Teller mines. Now, the S mines were the booby trap mines, you know, the bouncing Betty, as we called them. And they were dropped from airplanes, some of them, you know, and they were landing all around us, and we had to defuse them. But that was the early part of the war, which was not in our advantage, but we learned a lot from that defeat from Kasserine. And as we started to move out of the El Ghouta area, that's when we started the real Tunisian campaign. And the problems there were, what we did mostly was mine laying and pulling of mines. The pulling of mines became a very difficult thing because the telemines, which are anti-tank mines, had handles on them, and your tendency would be just to pull them out, and just you didn't have to even defuse them, just pull them out. But the Germans were clever enough that there was 3 wells under the telemine where any personnel mine could be attached to, and many of our, you know, comrade soldiers who were not familiar, and naturally none of us were until we found out that that's the way they performed their task. We never pulled mines that way again, and we took caution, and we would dig or probe till we found the mines, and we would attach a long tether to the handle and go back about 20 yards or so behind some, you know, obstructed view, and pull them that way. Most of them were not booby-trapped, but the ones that were devastating to whoever had to handle them. But that was basically what we did in the early part of the African campaign. Plus, on many occasions, we would go behind our own lines and spend an entire evening or nightfall laying our own minefields. And that was the most incredible thing in the world, to be out there on your own, just gathering mines and placing them. We had a system that was the 2 steps to the front ways and 1 step to the right, you know, 2 steps, and that's how the pattern of our mines were. And we didn't dig them in like the Germans did. We just laid them out there because all we did want to have them know that there was a minefield. We could see the German tanks coming from the counterattack. And that was an incredible sight. We had no way of stopping them. We didn't have anything. We had immediately, we sent word to battalion that these tanks were coming. They got in touch with the Navy, and the most remarkable sight that any human or soldier would ever witness, they zeroed in on the tanks from out in the water and took them out. And that was what saved the day in Sicily. Those tanks, there was at least half a dozen coming up, ready to attack, and they were taken out one by one by the Navy.
Sam, do you recall what you saw and what you heard when Omaha Beach?
When I hit Omaha Beach, we got ashore, and our trucks were coming over. There was a short bluff about 500 feet from the shoreline, but before we got to that bluff, there was a gully, a ditch, and so we already almost were dried off or got out of the water, and there we went back into water in this gully, and that was the most devastating. And that was not shown to us in the aerial view by our own information. So that was another thing. And then if you would turn around, the devastation, you probably didn't want to turn around. First of all, our mine trucks got hit, direct hits, and they went. So we lost our trucks. The vehicles that were parked along the shoreline were all the ones that were taken out of commission, so they were on fire. They were loading either wounded or dead on there. It was just not the kind of sight that humans can tolerate. And as we were detached, I couldn't even, we only had 4 of us who had to be anywhere. We had to meet up with the rest of the squad. We never found them that night.